Picture this. In 1929, a brand new car company sells 81,000 vehicles in just 12 months, smashing every record in the industry. 31 years later, that same company builds its final car, number 3034, and quietly disappears from history. What could kill a brand that started with such spectacular success? Bad engineering? Poor quality? No. The answer is far more chilling. Desoto was murdered by its own family. Today, we're diving into one of Detroit's darkest stories, where corporate cannibalism, internal warfare, and cold-blooded sacrifice turned an American icon into a forgotten ghost. This is the tragedy of Desoto. 1928. Jazz rhythms pulsed through America's streets. Prosperity seemed endless, and the automobile was transitioning from luxury item to middle-class necessity. Walter P. Chrysler stood at his window and saw something others missed, a gaping hole in a market begging to be filled. Below sat Plymouth, his affordable entry-level brand for first-time buyers. Above stood Chrysler itself, commanding premium prices for those who'd already made it. But between them, empty space. Dangerous, profitable, empty space. And if Chrysler Corporation didn't claim that territory, General Motors absolutely would. Desoto was born from that strategic calculation, not out of passion or vision, but as a chess piece positioned to block competitors. The company needed a name that sounded both adventurous and aspirational. They chose Hernando Desoto, the Spanish explorer, a name that echoed with the thunder of discovery, perfectly suited for an America busy paving its own roads into the future. In 1929, the Desoto 6, also called Model K, rolled into showrooms. It carried Chrysler's DNA in its elegant proportions, but was deliberately toned down to hit a more accessible price point. Look at the front end, and you'll notice the Spanish-inspired grille, a small but crucial detail signaling this wasn't just a rebadged Chrysler, but a distinct brand learning to stand on its own. Under the hood hummed an L-head inline 6, displacing 174.9 cubic inches. Nothing revolutionary, but absolutely appropriate for its era. Durable, easy to maintain, and robust enough to make drivers feel they were commanding real power, not just transportation. The 55 horsepower rating wasn't about bragging rights. It was about confidence, about delivering value that middle-class buyers could trust. The market response was explosive. In those first 12 months, 81,065 Desotos flew off dealer lots. The entire industry stopped and stared. Overnight, Desoto transformed from unknown newcomer to legitimate phenomenon, a success story dealers recounted with genuine amazement. But success created its own problem. Desoto was now stepping directly on the toes of Dodge, the sibling Chrysler had recently acquired. In any family with multiple children, even the best behaved can accidentally cause friction. And in the Chrysler corporate family, friction was about to escalate into something far more dangerous. Then came the 1930s and the Great Depression's crushing weight. Cash evaporated. Buyers scrutinized every dollar. Cars that once symbolized freedom and aspiration now represented an agonizing decision. Industry-wide sales collapsed. Dealerships went silent. Rows of unsold vehicles sat like empty theater seats, awaiting an audience that wouldn't come. Most automakers responded by playing it safe. Familiar designs, conservative styling, anything to avoid frightening already nervous buyers. Walter P. Chrysler chose a radically different path. Instead of retreating to chrome decoration and conventional body styling, he decided to reimagine the automobile itself based on aerodynamics, wind resistance, and the pure physics of motion. Desoto entered this bold experiment with the airflow, a declaration that Chrysler wasn't just building cars to sell, but building cars to lead. In 1934, the Desoto Airflow emerged with construction that sounded revolutionary even by contemporary standards. A semi-unitized chassis with rigid truss bridge architecture forming a reinforced skeleton. The body wasn't simply a box mounted on a traditional frame. This structural integrity wasn't mere engineering showmanship. It delivered superior ride quality, reduced body twist, and enabled more rational passenger compartment design. From outside, people encountered a completely unfamiliar shape. A cascading waterfall-style grille. Headlights integrated smoothly into the body rather than protruding like separate appendages. A cabin pushed forward, creating the impression of forward motion even when stationary. It looked like an artifact from the future accidentally parked in a 1934 lot. Inside, the airflow delivered genuine comfort. Spacious seating arranged like a rolling living room, improved visibility, and a quietness that conventional boxy cars couldn't match. If you're detail-oriented, you'll recognize this as inside-out design, starting with occupant experience and then shaping the exterior form accordingly. But American buyers weren't ready for such radical departure. Instead of seeing the future, many saw something strange, even earning mocking nicknames as if aerodynamic design were somehow aesthetically offensive. Sales plummeted. That crash dragged Desoto down industry rankings with brutal force. For a young brand, this wasn't just a disappointing sales year. It shattered confidence, damaged dealer networks, and undermined the positive image customers were just beginning to form after 1929's spectacular debut. So here's my question for you. If you were a buyer in 1934, would you choose familiar, conventional styling, or would you embrace the Airflow's future-forward vision? Drop your answer in the comments below. After the Airflow stumble, Desoto retreated to safer, more conservative design. The brand entered what many later called the shoebox era, where everything became squared off and utilitarian. When World War II arrived, the entire American auto industry shifted roles like a film production switching to wartime documentary. During those years, Desoto halted civilian production completely and manufactured B-26 bomber fuselages and anti-aircraft weaponry instead. War's End triggered a buying frenzy unprecedented in American history. The market no longer demanded rebellion or aerodynamic innovation. People wanted durability, dependability, and vehicles that would serve reliably for years without causing headaches. Desoto satisfied that demand perfectly with model lines like Custom, Deluxe, and Powermaster, names that already sounded practical and solid. This became Desoto's identity. The car for steady working people, middle-class families, those viewing automobiles as life tools rather than aspirational dreams. The problem? Desoto remained faithfully committed to inline-six engines, machinery admirable for durability and ease of maintenance. But as Americans developed appetites for power and excitement, Desoto failed to deliver breakthrough performance. They improved driving convenience with semi-automatic transmissions like tip-toe shift, making urban operation easier. But for most buyers, that represented convenience, not passion. The brand image gradually trapped itself in peculiar territory. On screen, Desoto appeared as an instantly recognizable symbol of urban America, sometimes glamorous in Hollywood settings. But in real life, Desoto became tightly associated with one specific, overwhelmingly practical image: the taxi. Especially in New York, vintage photographs show streets thick with smoke and Desotos wearing taxi signs navigating through horns and traffic lights. Serving as a taxi isn't negative. It proves durability and endurance under constant operation. But from a branding perspective, it's a double-edged weapon. Once consumers habitually see your brand as a service vehicle, imagining it as a dream in their personal garage becomes nearly impossible. The consequence arrived slowly but inevitably. Desoto became trusted but somewhat bland. Older customers aged alongside the brand, maintaining loyalty from habit and positive experience. But the younger generation growing up post-war gravitated toward products that felt newer, faster, and bolder. While competitors learned to sell emotion through styling and power, Desoto sold practicality. Then 1955 arrived, and everything changed. Virgil Exner walked in like a new director commandeering the production, bringing an entirely different visual vocabulary. The forward look wasn't minor revision. It was revolutionary transformation in proportions and emotional impact. Chrysler amplified this atmosphere with a daring slogan. Suddenly, it's 1960. As if the entire corporation were betting on the future while still operating in the present. Desoto, after years surviving on practicality alone, suddenly received its first opportunity to become something people craved, not merely trusted. The lineup split into two distinct personalities. On one side stood the Fire Dome, the accessible entry door to this new era. On the other emerged the Fireflight, the spearhead of Desoto's reimagined image. The Desoto Fire Dome, a nameplate debuting in 1952 as Desoto's premium series before being repositioned as the entry model in 1955, presented a car deliberately maintaining certain propriety to appeal to mainstream buyers while feeling fresh enough to suggest upward mobility. The styling became more graceful. The body stretched longer and lower than previous generations, with trim details calibrated to feel upscale without ostentation. Under the hood sat a hemispherical combustion chamber 291 cubic inch V8. In the standard 1955 configuration, it emphasized smoothness and longevity, delivering around 185 horsepower, making Fire Dome a Desoto for buyers wanting highway confidence while still valuing practicality. Step over to the 1955 Desoto Fireflight, and the narrative tone shifts dramatically. If Fire Dome was an invitation into the future, Fireflight was an emphatic declaration that Desoto could lead the styling race. Built on the same new foundation, Fireflight typically featured heavier trim emphasis and more commanding presence, as if the car wanted to plainly announce it didn't just serve, it represented. Still featuring that hemispherical combustion chamber 291 cubic inch V8, but in a more potent configuration delivering around 200 horsepower in its 1955 debut year. Drivers could tangibly feel the difference between good enough and worth dreaming about. Sitting in the driver's seat, Desoto began selling the future through the sensation of control. The dashboard spread wide. Bright details evoked aircraft cockpits rather than ordinary car interiors. And the push-button gear selector transformed driving into a ritual of modernity. In Fire Dome, those features arrived as sufficient convenience. In Fireflight, they felt like status declarations, everything designed to make drivers feel they own the era, not just a car. The market responded immediately because Desoto had finally recaptured what it had been missing for years: desire. Sales surged in 1955. Showrooms remained illuminated. The Desoto name looked young again in buyers' eyes. This image peaked in 1956 when Fireflight was selected as the pace car for a major race. A closing scene proving Desoto had returned to the stage, not merely with durability, but with genuine style and presence. But precisely here, at the moment when the spotlight burned brightest, from 1957 forward, those lights began flickering like a movie theater losing power. All of Detroit charged into the flamboyant arms race of the jet age. Taller tail fins, longer bodies, more chrome, and engine specification sheets paraded like competitive scorecards. This was the era when people believed more horsepower equaled more pride, and taller fins signified higher status. Right in the middle of this fever, Desoto played two distinctly different cards to maintain its position in the game. The Adventurer represented the performance face, while the Firesweep served as the sales bridge, a hybrid choice designed to attract customers as the market began cooling. With the Desoto Adventurer, everything was engineered to feel like this was a Desoto that asked nobody's permission. Its styling carried the full intensity of peak tail fin era. Long, low, sharp, with chrome panels and character lines emphasized like bespoke tailoring, deliberately signaling this was a special edition built for buyers wanting thrills and wanting their automobiles to express their personality. Under the hood throbbed a hemispherical combustion chamber 345 cubic inch V8 fed by dual 4-barrel carburetors, pushing output to a level marketed as an era-defining statement, nearly achieving 1 horsepower per cubic inch. This wasn't merely a brochure number. You felt it during acceleration, when the engine note deepened and resonated, when the car surged into lanes as if the highway were its personal territory. Additionally, the Adventurer employed the legendary torsion bar suspension, making the body feel planted and stable, maintaining tire grip, and giving this substantial car a nimble, confident character at speed. In complete contrast, the Desoto Firesweep was born with an entirely different mission. This wasn't a performance flagship, but a vehicle designed to fill pricing gaps and attract more customers as the mid-price segment wavered. Firesweep's design still carried tail-fin language and shared DeSoto's era-appropriate boldness, but its presentation typically remained more restrained than adventurers. Less manifesto, more sensible choice for buyers wanting DeSoto style, without necessarily purchasing the strongest or most upscale variant. Because of its bridge role, Firesweep's engineering also pursued more practical and flexible directions. In 1957, Firesweep utilized a Dodge Polysphere V8 displacing 325 cubic inches. The standard configuration emphasized smoothness and durability, while the upgraded version with 4-barrel carburetor typically produced around 260 horsepower. In 1958, Firesweep moved to a 350 cubic inch V8, then in 1959 to a 361 cubic inch V8, demonstrating DeSoto's determination to keep climbing displacement numbers to avoid falling behind in specification sheet competition, but in a manner serving sales volume and market coverage, not pursuing performance icon status. Then 1958's punch landed, sparing nobody. Economic recession struck the mid-price segment with direct force, exactly where customers were already weighing desire against necessity. When money tightened, buyers either dropped down to cheaper alternatives or stretched upward to badges carrying more prestige, buying once and making it count. DeSoto fell directly into that squeeze. The adventurer could make people fall in love, but love wasn't enough when people feared risk. The Firesweep might have been more practical, but practicality got crushed by other choices within the Chrysler family itself. The greater tragedy unfolded behind factory doors. When Chrysler accelerated production, chasing ambitious targets, quality disintegrated like stitching unraveling on brand new suits. Rust appeared prematurely. Seals leaked. Rainwater penetrated areas that should have remained dry. At a moment when buyers were already cautious due to recession, a single doubt sufficed to make them walk away. And losing trust proved more devastating than losing horsepower. No matter how powerful the adventurer was, it couldn't rescue a brand once people started asking the most terrifying question. Is this car solid and trouble-free? And no matter how sensible the Firesweep was, it couldn't succeed when brand credibility was punctured. And just as DeSoto struggled maintaining balance, the market surrounding it revealed positioning's cruelty. Pontiac and Oldsmobile on General Motors' side continued thriving because they maintained clear product lineups and youthful images. On Ford's side, Edsel died young as a cautionary tale that if positioning falls out of rhythm and a launch comes at the wrong moment, a brand could be erased by the market instantaneously. But DeSoto fell into the most excruciating trap. It was being squeezed from within the Chrysler family itself. From below, Dodge pushed upward with models like the Royal Lancer, more appealing and closer in size and equipment. From above, Chrysler pushed downward with the Windsor, narrowing the price and status gap until buyers began questioning why they should choose DeSoto at all, when moving up or down just one rung gave them a clear choice. Stepping into 1960, Chrysler made a major technical shift. The entire lineup gradually migrated to unibody construction, major surgery for assembly lines that was both expensive and demanded complete production reorganization. In major transformations like that, the weakest names always get placed on the scales first. And DeSoto, already fragile after the 1958 recession and the 1957 quality disaster, entered this phase carrying something even more dangerous than weak sales, the perception that the brand was dying. Rumors spread faster than any advertising campaign. Buyers heard salesmen whisper. Salesmen heard other dealers gossip. In just one sentence, "It's probably being discontinued soon," was sufficient to make customers snap their wallets shut. Nobody wanted to purchase a car that could become an orphan tomorrow, with hard-to-find parts, plummeting resale value, and even personal pride left hanging in balance. And within Chrysler itself, the decision gradually crystallized. Sacrifice DeSoto to preserve the weakening Plymouth DeSoto dealer structure. Instead of maintaining a mid-price brand losing its reason to exist, Chrysler chose to compensate dealers with lower-priced Chrysler models, a name and identity change meant to retain customers and keep dealers within the system. Consequently, the 1961 DeSoto felt like a farewell letter written in haste. It no longer carried proud subnames like Fireflight or Fire Dome, but only a single designation, DeSoto, standing alone like a period at a page's end. Its design was as controversial as the brand's fate. A two-tier grille that felt heavy and canted headlights that made the car's face look unfamiliar, as if uncertain which decade it belonged to. Under the hood sat another symbolic transition, a 361 cubic inch V8 called Turbo Flash, no longer a Hemi. Not because 361 was weak, but because it demonstrated DeSoto had moved away from its role as a technical icon and become a vehicle that had to be cost-reduced, rationalized, and assembled from whatever parts already existed in the corporation's bins. Inside the cabin, cost-cutting showed through like the hiss of scissors on fabric. Many details borrowed from Chrysler, less unique identity, less anything that felt special, as if the brand had been stripped of the right to be itself in its final days. And finally, when Chrysler launched the Newport priced under $3,000, cheaper than a DeSoto, every question in buyers' minds suddenly had an answer. If it was the same corporation, the same dealer network, with bigger brand assurance, why choose DeSoto anymore? DeSoto had already been squeezed between Dodge and Chrysler for years, and now the very last thread holding it on the shelf of choices was severed. The ending was as cold as a statistic, and precisely because it was cold, it hurt even more. Only 3,034 units of the 1961 DeSoto were produced, a number so minuscule it felt like a few thousand scattered goodbyes across America. And on November 30th, 1960, the last DeSoto rolled off the assembly line, not like a legend being honored, but like an old worker quietly hanging his coveralls on a hook, switching off the lights, and closing the door. Looking back across DeSoto's entire journey, this isn't the story of a bad car. On the contrary, it's precisely because DeSoto experienced truly great eras that its collapse remains so memorable. Fireflights and adventurers today still make collectors hunt for them, like chasing an old film reel with its colors still vibrant, because they carry something modern cars rarely possess, genuine character forged in an era that dared to be bold. And before we close, I want to ask you the way I'd ask an old friend in the garage. Have you ever sat in a DeSoto? Or at least laid a hand on those push-button gear selectors, stood behind that massive tail fin, and felt yourself shrink in the face of an era that was almost too confident? If so, share your memories in the comments below. If you want to hear more Detroit tragedies, brands that were once sources of pride and then vanished, please subscribe to the channel so we can keep opening more forgotten film reels together. See you next time, everyone.